Hello everyone and welcome to the Jewellery Maker Academy. My name is Mark Smith and in these tutorials I'm going to be introducing you to the wonderful world of Kumihimo. Now Kumihimo is an amazing technique that takes many strands plaited into single braids. Kumihimo, literal translation, are cords knotting together. It's beautiful, it's a beautiful technique and it originated in China nearly 2,000 years ago now. Moved across to Japan and Japanese completely took the world by storm with Kumihimo and they use it to tie braids around kimonos, and even the samurai warriors used to make individual sections to attach their armour together when going into battle. And recently, over the past 30-40 years, it's taken the jewellery world by storm and we can embellish it with gemstones and seed beads, and we can even rosary link with it. As you can see, there's quite a selection of pieces you can make, all from this one simple technique, which I'm going to talk you through today. So in front of me, I've got a selection of the tools of the trade, we call it. This is some of the items that you're going to need, and we'll talk you through them in greater detail in each chapter we come to. So obviously we're going to be using discs. Now this is your Kumihimo discs. We'd have two sizes. We have the mini and we have the original. Now the original is the one that we're going to be using in all the tutorials in today's demonstrations. So you need your Kumihimo disc. In the next chapter I'll talk you through it and how we attach our cords, etc. Then you're going to need two other very important items. The first one is a weight. Now this is a weight with a little crocodile clip on the end, and as I said, in the next tutorial when we show you how to attach your cords, you'll see how just invaluable this is. Now it comes in two weights. In today's tutorials I'm going to be using the 50-gram weight. It's a weight that I've always used and I always get along with, so I'm not going to change it for the 100-gram. The reason that you would move up to a 100-gram weight is determining the number of cords that you're going to use on the disc, but we'll cover that later on. So your disc, your weight, and then also you're going to need these. Now these are Kumihimo bobbins. They're little acrylic poppers. So inside you have a main core, which we're going to attach our cords to. We're going to wrap the cords around, we're going to snap them shut, and these will be suspended below your disc as we're doing your knotting. If you don't use the bobbins, you will find within a couple of minutes all of your cords underneath your disc will become tangled, and we don't want that. So tiny little thing, really simple little thing like your bobbins will save you so much time and frustration. So that's your disc, your weight and your bobbins. So they're the fundamental items you're going to need to Kumihimo with. Then we're also going to need a lighter, which we're going to use if we find that our cords that we're going to use for each project start to fray. You can use nail varnish if you like, but this is a really quick fix. But I understand people might not be wanting to use a naked flame. So we've got a lighter. Then we're going to be showing you two different ways of attaching clasps to your Kumihimo, and both of them will use a form of glue. This is a jewellery glue. This is called GS Hypo Cement. This is a jewellery making glue. I tend to use, because I'm quite impatient, I tend to use super glue. As the name suggests, it sets in moments. Whereas if you're using the Hypo Cement or another jewellery making glue, you will need probably to leave it overnight to set. So that's your two glues. These are some of the bell caps and bobbin tops that we're going to be using in our pieces. Now they range from the cylindrical size with the little attachment clasp inside. This is a lobster claw. Then we have the ornate caps in many designs and patterns, and you'll notice that they have different sizes as well depending on the size of and width of your Kumihimo braid. So for example, we've got quite a big one here, and then we've got this tiny diddy weeny one here, and again you can see the aperture inside determines the number of cords or the thickness of cord. So as well as your bell caps, at the last chapter we're going to show you how to make your own, because there may be a time where your corded braid is too thin or too thick for a bell cap that you have at the end. So what you're going to need is 0.8mm wire, and you're also going to need bail making pliers. As you can see, this is a 6-step bail maker, so you're able to make bell caps in different gauges depending on the size of your braid, and we'll be covering that in the last chapter. If you don't want to use the glue to attach your braids to your bell caps, then you can also use wildfire. This is a beading thread used for seed beading, and this is a really nice way of binding up your edges rather than using glue. You will need to glue to attach your braid to the bell cap, but there's two different variations of securing your cords before we attach them, so we'll be covering that as well. Now you can probably see I'm working on a beading mat. That's just to keep everything nice and secure. And then also to attach our bell caps to our clasps, we're going to need a different version of jump ring. We're going to use oval jump ring, so these are really important, and as I mentioned in the finishing off stages we'll show you just how important they are. So we've covered the tools of the trade, and now I'm just going to show you a selection of cords that we're going to be using, or that I've used throughout my Kumihimo journey. So in front of me here we have, first of all, variation on nylon cord depending on different thicknesses and different colours. Then we've got hemp, if you want to go down the natural look. This is a really nice medium if you want to make pieces for gents, maybe, that aren't so feminine looking. Then we've got satin, and again this comes in a myriad of different colours, so if you want a really nice soft texture to your Kumihimo braiding. Then we've got wax cord, again ideal for gents jewellery or something with a bit more structure. My favourite medium for Kumihimoing is this. This is E-Lon cord, and this comes in two gauges, a 0.9mm and a 0.5. If I'm going to be adding seed beads or gemstones to my Kumihimo, this is probably my cord of choice. If you're not adding embellishments, then any of the other cords you mentioned, whether the nylon or the satin or the hemp or even the wax cord, is more than suitable. So we've covered the tools of the trade, we've covered the cords, so in the next chapter I'm going to show you all about the Kumihimo disc, how to attach your cords to the bobbins, and how we get started. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this first chapter I'm going to talk you around the Kumihimo disc and how to attach our cords to our bobbins. So this is your Kumihimo disc, and you'll notice straight away that around the outside there are digits from number 1 all the way around to number 32. Now each number denotes the number of cords that you can actually use to make your braid. In today's demonstrations, fundamentally we're going to be using 8 cords, and then in the following chapter we're going to move up to 12. The most that I've ever used at one time is 16, and after you get to 16 upwards the patterns become quite intricate and it does take a lot of following. So for these demonstrations as part of the JM Academy we're going to deal with 8 and 12, and each of the corresponding numbers has a little slot either side, and the slots are what we're going to pop the cords in to keep them nice, secure and separate. So we're going to be talking in the next couple of chapters about the 8 warp braid. So these are some of the bobbins that we talked about in the introduction, and these are already wound. So I'm going to show you how we secure the cords first of all in bobbins. And also I want to talk about quickly how you work out lengths you need. Now I've been Kumihimoing now for about 10 years, and I have a little rule as far as lengths of pieces of jewellery. What I tend to do, if I'm making a bracelet, I take a piece of cord, I wrap it 3 times around my wrist, and then I add another length for securing and finishing off. So for a bracelet, I use 4 lengths around the wrist. If I'm making a necklace, I decide on the length of the necklace, so whether it's an 18-inch or a 20-inch, and I times that by 3. Okay, you don't need to worry about the length at the beginning and at the end to attach your cord. You can if you want to, if you're new to Kumihimoing, but you'll find that 3 times the length of your necklace that you're going to be require is more than adequate. And obviously, if you're using a finer gauge of cord, you'll have more knots. So in effect, it's always worth just adding that little extra if you're feeling a bit unsure. And it's all about trial and error in the end. But that little equation that I just shared with you there has served me right all through my Kumihimo journey. So what I've got in front of me here, I've got some nylon cord, and this is 1mm thickness. I've cut the length that I need, and because we're doing 8 threads in our Kumihimo braid, you cut 8 pieces of cord exactly the same length. I've opened up my little bobbin, as we showed you in the introduction, and all we're going to do is wrap our cord around that central core. We're going to tie a single knot, so you can see it's nicely tucked in around that core. Then I'm going to tie a second knot, just like so. And I'm just going to take my pair of scissors, give it a little snip, and all I'm going to do is I hold the curved side in my left thumb and finger, and all I'm going to do is wrap my cord around that core on the inside of the bobbin. Leave a length of about 6 inches because we'll need this to tie to our bobbin at the end, and we're just going to snap that shut, and that is now nice and secure. And as we're going around doing our braid, all we're going to do is just feed out cord from our bobbins. So I'll do one more for you. We've opened up our bobbin. I'm going to take my cord once around the core on the inside, tie once. I'm going to go in and tie again, cut that little tail off inside, turn it round 90 degrees so I'm holding the curved side, and then I'm just going to wrap around the core like so, and then our bobbins are ready. So as simple as that. So you can see now I've got my selection of 8 bobbins all ready to go to do our 8 warp braid. So in the next chapter, I'm going to show you how we attach our cords to our disc and how we get started in the 8 cord Kumihimo. So come and join me for the next chapter. So we've now got our 8 bobbins prepped. We've got the right length of cord. Now it's time to attach them to our disc and begin our Kumihimo braid. So all we're going to do is we're just going to release enough cord from each of our bobbins, normally about 6 to 8 inches. We don't have to be too spot on. And then we're going to gather up those 8 cords. Just make sure they're all at the same point. At this point we don't want to waste any cord. So we're going to attach them all. And then all we're going to do is we're going to take those 8 cords and we're just going to tie a simple overhand knot connecting all of those 8 cords like so. And then what I like to do is I like to just go round each of the cords, pulling nice and tight just to secure everything in position. And we're ready to go. So we've now got a nice secure knot. Then this is where we need our bobbin, our weight, sorry, with the little crocodile clip. So we're going to take our weight, open the jaws and attach it to our knot, nice and secure. So that's now ready to go. So we're going to offer all of this now up to our disc. So we take our disc and with the digits uppermost, we're going to take our weight from the top through the hole in the middle, and we're just going to get all of those little tufts underneath to secure behind the disc. So this is the 8 thread braid. So what we're going to do, you can now see that we've got 4 compass points. We've got north, east, south and west. And what we're going to do is we're going to place one of the cords each side of the 4 compass points. So I'm going to be really random with my cords. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take one to the left. Let's go for another colour, and then whichever cord is near. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of different patterns available on internet and search engine sites. It's always a good idea just have a little, once you master the technique, is go online and look for different techniques. Now you can see at this point that the green and yellow are overlapping. You don't have to do this, but I'm quite particular in my Kumihimo, so I just need to make sure that we don't have any crossovers. Okay, so we now have our 8 threads at our 4 compass points. And this is your basic Kumihimo disc setup, and we're going to do the straightforward 8 cord braid. So Very simple little moves that you need to follow one after the other after the other. So we're going to start with bottom left. We're going to lift that out of the slot and we're going to transfer it across the board to top left. So it's on the left of the 2 cords that were there previously. So you'll now notice that we've got 1 at the bottom and 3 at the top. So we brought the bottom one, bottom left across to top left. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pick up top right and bring it across to bottom right. That's all we do. Bottom left to top right to bottom right. We're going to turn the disc, in my case, anti-clockwise, 90 degrees. It doesn't matter if you go clockwise or anti-clockwise, you just need to maintain that direction throughout your braid. Otherwise, you'll find if you change directions, all you're going to be doing is undoing your previous work. We're going to pick up bottom left, across to top left, top right, across to bottom right, turn the disc to the left 90 degrees. Bottom left to top right to bottom right, turn the disc. Bottom left, top right, bottom right, turn the disc. And it is as simple as that. So we'll do a few moves and I'm going to give you a little tip that you will find invaluable as you're progressing your braid. And as you can see, all of those bobbins are nicely secured underneath. There's no tangling, as you can see. So it's definitely worth just a little tiny little outlay of money to buy a set of 8, or maybe 2 sets of 8 if you want to progress to the 12 braid. But it's just going to save so many headaches. By now, you see your cords would have all tangled up and you'd be in a bit of a mess. So we're just going to continue with our braid, and as I said, this is using 1mm nylon cord and it builds up quite quickly. The finest braid I've ever made is with a 0.4mm E-Lon cord, and it produces an incredibly fine braid that you can actually use to actually go through drill holes of larger drill holed gemstones. You may struggle with seed beads, and when we come to the beading section towards the end of the tutorial, I'll talk you through different sizes and gauges of cord that you can use. So we'll do a few more. And it's very therapeutic. You can pop on some music or have a TV program on in the background. As long as you remember the simple moves: bottom left, top right, bottom right, turn 90 degrees in the same direction. It always has to be the same. If you do decide to change direction, as I mentioned, all you're going to be doing is undoing your previous work. So in effect, the Kumihimo will tell you that you're doing it wrong. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to show you, I'm going to flip it over and you can see how quickly that braid has formed inside. And because it's completely random, it's actually made quite a nice pattern inside. So see how quickly that builds up. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And this is such a simple little technique that it's ideal for getting kids in their beginning of jewellery making journey. It's a really nice little technique and a minimum of tools. As you can see, it's just your disc, your bobbins, your cord and your weight. And if they are very young, you can always do the cutting of the cords for them. So it's a great way of enticing children into the world of jewellery. So you will just continue this now, and I'm going to give you that little tip I mentioned. So you're happily making your Kumihimo braid and the telephone rings, or there's a knock at the door and you have to stop what you're doing. You'll find this tip incredibly useful. When you are distracted, lift up your bottom left cord, take it across to the top left, then you're ready to put your disc down and go and do whatever needs doing downstairs or in another room. So now when you come back, you will know straight away that the top right is the next move you have to make. So you'll bring that across, you'll turn your disc, and then you will continue. Now if I didn't do that, there are 2 sets of cords, the top set of 2 and the bottom set of 2, which are positioned exactly the same. We've got the left cord going underneath the horizontal, top left going underneath the horizontal, and the same with the green and the orange. So if you came back and your disc was in array, you wouldn't know whether it was this set or this set here. And as soon as you started again and it was the wrong set, your colours would be completely thrown. And if you were wanting to stick to a pattern, it would throw the pattern out. And you probably wouldn't notice until inch and a half on to your design, and then you'd have to rewind and start that little pattern again. So that little tip, just releasing one of the cords across to the opposite side, putting your work down, you'll know when you come back exactly which side you need to come back to. And all you're going to do then is just continue with your pattern until you have the length of your cord, of your braid, sorry, that you need for your piece of jewellery. So on my left here, what I've got is just a selection of the tiny braids we were talking about. So this one here is using very fine. Now this is using your 0.4mm braid, as you can see, and this is a neon ombre cord. It's very, very fine, to the point where I've actually doubled up on my cords just to make it ever so slightly thicker. So this is a very, very fine braid. This has got nothing on it at all, no embellishments. As you can see, it's got a very, very fine, and I've actually used this as a spectacle chain. As you can see, we've got the spectacle chain endings here. And then if we go a bit thicker here, this is using a zari cord. So this is very glittery cord. And this is using your 0.9mm. This is an amazing zari cord. And again, a different type of finding again. These are using your barrel endings. And then this is one of my favorites. This is using satin, which we mentioned in the introduction. And you can see the amazing color range that are available and just the different variation of thicknesses. So we've gone from our 2mm satin to our 1mm zari to our 0.5mm, exactly the same technique. And just look how different those braids can look. So that's your 8mm, your 8 cord braid. So now we've covered the 8 cord Kumihimo braid, we're now going to move on to the 12 cord. So without further ado, come along and join me. Welcome back everyone. We've just dealt with 8 cords, so I think we're going to move up a notch now and we're going to go on to 12. And this is a beautiful, beautiful technique that provide you with these most incredible twisted braids. So you'll need at least 3 colours for these pieces. And as you see, you can see that the most incredible effect. So unlike the first braid we showed you in the previous chapter, which is more of a straightforward cylinder, this has a distinct twist about it. And you can see just some of these effects you can get just with 3 colours. Absolutely beautiful. I was very patriotic with this one. It's absolutely gorgeous. So the first thing you need to do with this technique is you need to decide the colour of your main spiral running through the centre of a pattern. You can probably see it's more prominent than the other 2 cords, and I would suggest going for a dark colour as your prominent spiral, and it will just stand out from your other 2 colours. So you can see on my board here the 3 colours that I've chosen. I've gone for a navy blue as my main spiral colour, and I've gone for this beautiful lime green and the turquoise blue. So those 3 colours I think really do complement each other well, and we've got that really dark, vibrant colour going through the centre that make our spiral. So what I've got here now is we've got our disc set up, and it's slightly different. And because we've got 12 cords, I've not put the bobbins on for demonstration purposes because I'm only been doing a small section, but I definitely advise if you're going to be doing a whole braid of this spiral to make a bracelet, for example, or a necklace, pop the bobbins on. And again, exactly the same measurements that we mentioned in the introduction. So you can see my disc is slightly differently set up. Your dark cord, you will need 4 lengths of, and then you'll need 4 lengths of your other 2 colours as well. So this will make up your 12 colour braid, your 12 cord braid. So what we're going to do exactly the same way is we're going to join them all together with a knot, as we did in the previous chapter, and this you will have your weight attached to. So your dark colour, take the 4 cords, separate them into 2 sets of 2 and place them either side of west on your board or either side of east. So number 8 and number 24. Okay, that's your dark colour. This will make your main twist. Then we're going to separate our green into 4, 2 sets of 2, and we're going to place them 1 space to the left of north and 1 space to the left of south. So we've got the 2 green on one side, and we're going to do the same with the turquoise blue. So 1 set of 2, 1 slot across from north, and then your second set, 1 set across from south. Okay, so we've got 2 blue on the right hand side, 2 green on the left, and our dark navy blue running through the centre. So let's make a start. So we're going to take our cords, and it's basically the same routine that we did in our last demonstration with the 8 warp. So we're going to pick up bottom left across to top left, and then top right across to bottom right. We're going to move straight across to the pale blue, bottom left across to top left, top right across to bottom right. We're going to then turn our disc, bottom left across to top left, top right across to bottom right. Turn our disc. It's always that 90-degree angle, and then we're going to repeat. So bottom left across to top left, top right across to bottom right. Move across to the green, bottom left to top left, top right across to bottom right. Turn your disc 90 degrees, bottom left to top left, top right to bottom right. Turn the disc. So we do the 2 sets of the paler colours, the green and the blue, in 1 move, then we turn our disc. We do our dark blue in 1 move, turn the disc. So bottom left, top right, bottom right, onto the blue, bottom left to top right to bottom right, turn the disc 90 degrees, bottom left to top right to bottom right, turn the disc, bottom left to top right to bottom right, swap hands. You will need to use both hands for this. Bottom left to top right to bottom right, turn the disc. And then we're just going to continue with this technique. Across, and then across. And again, always say in that anti-clockwise or clockwise direction. And as I said, if you do go the wrong way, accidentally, you're just undoing your previous work. So the Kumihimo will show you that you've made the mistake. So you're going to continue. And you'll notice that your cord position doesn't actually move very far because you're just replacing opposite cords and then turning your disc. I'm going to turn again. So we'll do a few more of these, and then I will show you how it looks. And again, this is quite a nice therapeutic warp to do. Turn the disc. As I mentioned in the introduction, I've done 16 cords before, but I've never ventured further than that. Maybe I should have a go and see what we can come up with. But if you wanted to do really intricate patterns and zigzags or flowers, floral patterns, etc., you will need to use quite a few more cords in your Kumihimo disc. Turn the disc. And you can see now, I'm about to show you the braid that we've made so far, how important it is to have the darkest colour running through the centre. It acts like a spine. So we turn the disc, it's always that 90 degrees anti-clockwise or clockwise, depending on which direction you're heading. While we're doing this, I will just mention it might be worth, these are very, very, very inexpensive Kumihimo discs, and I would definitely recommend buying 3. So you can also Kumihimo with wire as well. So I would have 1 disc for your wire. I would have 1 disc for your finer cords, maybe your 0.4, your 0.5 millimeter cords, and then another disc for your thicker cords, your 1 millimeter, your 1.5 millimeters, because over time the slots around your board will loosen ever so slightly. And for example, I'm using a thick cord now. If I moved on to a finer, thinner cord, I mean, it shouldn't pull through too much because you've got a weight and the weight of the bobbins counteracting it, but there's always an off chance that it may slip through because there's no grip on your cords. So I would definitely recommend buying at least 3 and just make a little mark somewhere, like a little letter or something, maybe fine or thick or wire, just so you know which disc is for which braid. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it over, and you can see, actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it off the disc. You'll get a better view and just see how beautiful this is. And again, if the doorbell rings or there's a knock at the door or the telephone, just remember to make sure that you've got 3 cords on one end and just 1 on the other. So you can see just having that dark blue running through the center there really lifts that spiral and the green and blue coming through the center. It's a great little technique, and just from adding 4 cords extra with 1 extra set of moves, it completely transforms your Kumihimo braiding. So we've counted your 8 cord, we've encountered your 12 cord. I think the next ideal place to head is embellishing your Kumihimo braids with some seed beads or some gemstones. So come along and join me. Hi everyone, and welcome back to probably my favourite section of all of these tutorials that we're sharing today. And this is where we start embellishing our braids. Definitely recommend your 8 cord braid for this. It's definitely the most structured and I think the most beautiful. Now to my left you can see a huge selection of pieces that I've bought in, that I've made at home. Anything from tiny little seed beads right up to quite large pony beads on the piece that I've got on my left here. So we can go really delicate to quite fun and festival looks. We can do full beaded necklaces, we can do different size bracelets, we can even do beaded tassels on the necklace that you can see there with the purple braid there. And the 2 pieces behind, I've coined, rather unromantically, but I've coined the spark plug necklace, and this is using 3 different sizes of seed beads in a beautiful enlarging to small pattern to get the most amazing effects. So what I've got in front of me is a small selection of some of the beads and gemstones that are suitable to use. If we go with the seed beads first, as I mentioned, 3 different sizes, and again this is all determined by the thickness of your cord, which is why in the introduction I said that the E-Lon, either the 0.5 or the 0.9 gauge, are probably my go-to cords if I'm going to embellish with seed beads. So we've got 11/0 seed beads, we've got 8/0s, and we've got 6/0s. And the number denotes to the number of beads sat in a row, whole uppermost in an inch. So 11/0, 11 in an inch, 8/0, 8 in an inch, etc. So the larger the number, the smaller the bead. Then we've got our gemstones. And I would definitely recommend a couple of sizes. I probably wouldn't go any bigger than a 6 millimeter round, purely because of the weight factor. If you can imagine 8 cords, each full of your 6 millimeter beads, and any larger than that, it would be quite weighty. My ideal gemstone size is this one here, which is your 4 millimeter. I've probably used 4 millimeter rounds in Kumihimo more than any other size, either your 4 mil or your 6 So here are a couple of pieces that I've got here. So this is a close-up of the spark plug necklace that I've just mentioned. So as you can see, we've got our Kumihimo braid, which uses this is your 0.5mm gauge. And then I've added 11O seed beads, moving up to 8Os. And in the center, we have our 6O rounds. And then we move smaller from our 8s into our 11s. So that's incorporating all three sizes. The technique that I'm going to show you is exactly the same. It'll just be different, the different combination of beads you add to your cords. Then we've got this piece here, which is one of my favorites. This is a random mix of your 8O seed beads. And again, I've used a simple black cord. Again, this is your 0.9mm. And this is, again, beautiful piece of work. Now you can replicate this in a necklace form if you want to, but just bear in mind that all of these beads need to be added to your cords before you start your Kumihimo. I'll talk you through that in a second. Then this piece here is, again, a beautiful technique. This is using your 8 cords. 4 of the cords will have 8O beads on, and 4 will have your 6O beads, and you get this incredibly beautiful spiral pattern formed. And we were talking about gemstones, and one of my favourite gemstones is hematite, and this particular piece is using 6mm rounds. And with these I've used black 8O beads in between, not only to get a spiral pattern, but just to cut down on the weight and the ease of Kumihimoing. And you can see the Kumihimo braid at the top in these funky spiral and lattice net patterns. So that's your 6mm gemstone round. So there's so many different combinations of beads or seed beads, or a mixture of both, and different sizes. And then we've not even touched on color grading and ombreing. It's just so many different techniques and designs out there. So I've got my disc set up, and I'm going to show you how we've accomplished that. So we set up our disc exactly the same way as we did in chapter 2. 2 cords, north, east, south and west. We've taken our cords once we've bobbined them up, and you can see that I've already started doing my Kumihimo braid going down the center of the disc. Now, when I'm using a cord with a bead, I try to use the thickest cord that will go through the drill hole of the seed bead or of the gemstone. So if I'm using an 11O seed bead, you will have to use your 0.5mm cord. These are 8Os, and easily you can use your 0.9mm cord. And another reason I've chosen the thicker cord is it makes your jewellery come alive quicker. If you're using a finer gauge, you will have a finer Kumihimo braid, and it'll take quite a long time to actually make the braid before we start beading. So let's take one of these bobbins. And what I did for this selection is I took 4 colours of 8Os. I took bronze, black, gold and silver, and what I did is I popped them all in a bag and gave them a good mix. So the combination of beads on my cords are completely and utterly random. And this is the technique that I did on the bracelet that I showed you here. So you can see this is all random as well. So this is the technique if you want a really nice random. It gives a look of a harlequin about it. So this is what I've done here, and then all I've done is I've spilled them out. So all you do is, before you attach your cords to your bobbins, is you thread on a certain number of beads or gemstones onto each of your cords. So for demonstration, I've popped on, I think there's 12 beads on each of the bobbins. What I tend to work out is, if I'm using any type of beading, if you pop on 6 of your 8Os on each, that's equivalent to an inch length of your completed bracelet or necklace. So 6 beads per inch. If you were going for 11Os, you would have 9 in an inch. If it was 6Os, you would have 3 in an inch. So that's 3 beads per inch on each of your bobbins. And that's a really good rough estimate of the number of beads that you will need. And obviously if you're mixing up sizes or you're incorporating gemstones, again, that will just change. So again, it's all about trial and error and practicing. And you can never make a mistake with Kumihimo. If you run out of beads, it becomes a bracelet. If you find out that you've got just not enough for a necklace, all you can do is undo your bobbin, thread on more beads, and then redo your bobbin up again. So every single mistake that you make with number of beads and length of cords is easily remediable. It really is. So what I've done is I've popped on my 12 8/0s, completely random, on each of my bobbins, and I've made my inch of bare braid. And that's whenever I'm making a necklace or a bracelet, I always try to leave an inch of braid. Two reasons. One, I think it's a bit of a waste of time to go to all the work having beads at the back of the neckline or under the wrist. And also, in the final chapter coming up shortly, I'm going to be showing you how we attach our cord endings and our clasps. So obviously, you will need a bit of bare cord braid to attach your bell caps or your finishing off to. So that's another reason why you do it. Another reason that you might want to do braid on its own, first of all, is you only have a certain number of gemstones and you want to create a central section. So you would have a longer section of braid, a middle section of gemstones or seed beads, and then your longer braid again. Again, it's all about what suits you and having a play. And as I said, you never make mistakes in jewellery. And if you do make mistakes, you just dismantle it and start again. So it's wonderful. So do you remember that little tip I explained to you earlier about leaving your disc 3 and 1? This is why it's really important. So I'm just going to do a couple of sections. So it's exactly the same. We've taken our 8 ends, we've tied them in a single knot, and we've attached our crocodile clip. So we're just going to do a few more. Bring it across. And again, this is your 0.9mm cord, which go on your 8/0 seed beads very easily. So we're just going to continue. And you can either measure an inch or you can count the number of moves. So that's 1 move, this is 2, 3, 4. So I either do an inch, or if I'm using a thicker cord, I count 100 moves. And then I know that when I get to the other end of the necklace or bracelet, I just repeat those 100 moves, and I know that's going to be exactly the same length. So I think we're at a nice point now where we can start incorporating our seed beads. Just makes that nice and central for you. So it's exactly the same move. The move doesn't change. All we're going to do is this. We're going to lift up our disc. We're going to slide down our first seed bead, and we're going to pop it under the horizontal cord. We're going to take our cord across to the same position. So bottom left to top left, all we've done is dropped that little seed bead under the horizontal. So we're moving on to the top right. We're going to lift our cord out of the slot. We're going to slide the seed bead down. And we're going to hook it under the horizontal and then feed it across. We're going to turn our disc 90 degrees. We're going to pick up our next bobbin. We're going to slide down the first 8/0 seed bead until it hooks underneath that horizontal cord. We're going to complete the move. Top right. We're going to slide it down so it sits and hooks underneath the 8/0. So you can already see the 4 8/0s secured around those horizontal threads. We're going to take our next cord, and because we're using 8 bobbins, when we've done our 8 seed beads, that'll be round 1 completed. We'll pop that in and hook it underneath. Turn the disc. So the moves don't change. All we're going to do is we're just going to pop a seed bead underneath and catch it in the horizontal cords. Going to get our next. Going to slide that down. Feed it across. Pick up our next. And again, if you are interrupted, remember always to leave 3 and 1 on your board. And then we're going to drop the bead in, come across the horizontal. And this is a really nice combination actually. The 0.9mm E-Lon and your 8/0 seed beads, for me, they are probably one of the best combinations. You tend to find sometimes if your gemstones are highly polished or very round or too large or too small, that sometimes they slip from out of the horizontal cords. And if you don't notice, you continue doing your braid, you will notice that little holes will appear in your finished piece of work. So always, always take care when you're using anything else. I would definitely recommend, if this is your first beaded Kumihimo piece of work, I would definitely go down the 0.9mm E-Lon and the 80 seed bead route. It's a really good way of practicing. It's pretty fail-safe. There aren't any errors formed. And we don't want you being frustrated in your first attempt at beaded Kumihimo. I want everyone to learn this fascinating technique, and I think with this combination of the two, cords and beads, I don't think you can go wrong. So we'll just do a few more, and then I'll show you how we go from your beaded section to your straightforward bare braid. And what I really love about Kumihimo is once you've got your beads added to your bobbins and you're ready to go, as I mentioned earlier, you can pop a podcast on, or you can listen to some music or something. It's so straightforward. It's very therapeutic. You get lost in a world of your own doing Kumihimo. It's fascinating. So we'll just continue. I'll do one more round and then I'll show you how it looks underneath. So again, just slide that down and it hooks nice and neatly underneath. I think after the tutorial, I may take this home and finish this because I think it's going to look absolutely beautiful. I love this mix of 4 colours. Slide that down. There will be later on a follow-up Kumihimo tutorial session on the JM Academy, and it'll all be about pattern forming and spirals and harlequin patterns and trellises. So make sure you keep an eye out onto the Jewellery Maker website in the JM Academy section, and we'll keep you posted when that will be available. So I think we will stop there. And what we're going to do is we're going to revert back to our basic Kumihimo. So from now, we're not going to incorporate any beads. So all we do is we just continue with our braid, and this locks everything nice and neatly into position. So you can see it's like a little trap door. It's now enclosed all of the beads. One of my favourite techniques is the station necklace, where you would do an inch of braid and then an inch of beading, inch of braid, inch of beading, and you get what's called a station necklace. Again, that's really beautiful. So we're just going to continue with our braiding. So once you've got that little technique, you can actually get quite a speed up. And when you are using a thicker cord like this, it is quite quick. So the next section, the last section that I'm going to show you is how we finish off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of that with the piece I'm working on before we move on to the final section. So just do 2 more, and then I can show you what we've made already. Make sure that's nice. So I'm just going to tip this over, and you can see how beautiful that looks. I think that looks absolutely beautiful, just for that random mix of beads. Now that every single one is nicely locked, insecure, it can't go anywhere. And there's our braid, and you can just see the next section of braid that we're making coming out. Okay, so we'll imagine that we've made a full bracelet or a necklace. I'm going to show you the beginning of finishing off now, and then we'll move on to the final section where I'll show you how we pop our caps and things on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our weight. So we've removed our weight, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take cords from each side diagonally opposite each other. So I'm going to pick up top right, and I'm going to pick up bottom left, and then using a pair of scissors, we're going to cut the cords top left and top right. So I'm going to cut 1, and cut 2. And then we're going to take those 2 cords and we're going to tie a single overhand knot, pulling nice and tight, followed by a second. Then we can move those bobbins out of the way. I'm going to turn my disc. I'm going to take the next set of 2 on the left, bottom left and top right. I'm going to cut my cords. And I'm going to bring those 2 cords up, a single knot followed by another. I'm going to turn my disc and I'm going to take the opposite 2 cords. And then I'm going to pick those up. Again, we're going to tie a single knot followed by another knot. And then we're going to do that last set of 2. If this part of the piece isn't done properly, you will find that your cords will unravel and all of that hard work will have gone to waste. So now we can take that out and you can see that we've now got our braid either side and then we've got our beaded section running through the center. So this is the point where you get to where we move on to our final chapter, which is all about finishing off and adding our clasps. So without further ado, come along and join me on that final section. We're nearly at the end. This is the final chapter in our Kumihimo journey, and this is all about finishing off your braids, attaching your bell caps and your endings, and making your own caps if you don't have any available to finish off your braids. So in front of me here I've got 2 sections of braid that I've taken off my disc, and I'm going to show you 2 ways of securing your braid. If I cut into this now, it would all, as this has happened here, it would all fray and you'd have problems keeping it together. So I'm going to show you 2 variations of how to keep it nice and secure, and then I'm going to show how we attach it to our bell caps. So as I mentioned in the introduction, my favourite way is with good old super glue. So I'm going to use the smaller braid for this. So we've got our braided section. The 2 ends here I've secured already because I didn't want it all fraying on the demonstration, but I will dispose of those 2 ends. I want to show you how it would actually look. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to hold the braid in my left hand. I'm just going to pop just a tiny amount of glue. You don't want very much, just a tiny amount of glue around the braid. And what happens is the glue is now permeating down through the braid, making sure that's going to be nice and secure and glued to each other. So while that is setting, I'm going to flip it over and do the other side with the other version, the other way that you can do this, and then I'll show you the difference. So the second variation, if you didn't want to go down the glue, is using the wildfire, the beading thread. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut a small section off. You only probably want about 30 centimetres, something like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a short end, and all we're going to do is tie a double knot. So once and twice, like so. And then what we're going to do, holding the thread away from us, is we're simply going to take our long thread and we're going to wrap tightly to about 5 millimeters. It doesn't need to be more than that, just 5 millimeters, all the way up to the end of the measurement, and then all the way back down until it meets your little tail that you left. And then what we're going to do is we're going to then tie a series of knots. So we're going to tie a single knot nice and securely at the top, pull that nice and tight, and then another single knot, and then followed by a double knot. So 1 and 2, pulling that nice and tight. So what we're going to do to this first cord, this thread section, is we're going to just cut the ends off, like so. And then what we're going to do is, using your scissors or a pair of wire cutters from your toolkit, is we're simply going to cut above where we tied our threads. So you can now see that instead of this happening, all our cords fraying, we now have a nice and secure ending. And then what we would do is we would take our ending of choice. So I'm going to go for this bell cap. And as I mentioned in the introduction, they come in varying shapes and sizes. I'm just going to make sure that we have a bell cap that fits, and this one fits beautifully. Okay, so we know that we're in the right direction. Now, I would definitely recommend, and this again is another little top tip, that we prepare our bell cap with our finishing clasp before we attach it to our braid. So I'm going to put that to one side, and we're going to use our oval jump rings. So I'm going to open one of the jump ring, and this is just a pair of flat nose pliers from our basic toolkit. I'm going to take my bell cap, I'm going to feed that through, and then I'm going to take, let's go for a bit of my little toggle clasp. So I'm just going to separate the toggle, and I'm going to pop on my round, my ogle. I'm going to pop that on. Now that is nice and secure. And I'm going to go ahead and attach my bell cap to my cord. So what all I'm going to do, again, you will need glue for this part because we need to glue our braid into our bell cap. So as I said at the beginning, I don't have very much patience. I like the job done very quickly, and so I use the glue that's super. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to drop one drip. That's all you need, just one drip into the cap. And I'm going to take my end, I'm just going to feed it into the cap. That fit very, very snugly. And as you can see, just a couple of moments and that will set nicely. Okay, so we'll go back to the first end. And remember, we glued our section. So instead of using the thread, I've put a little piece of super glue across the braid. So I'm going to go across and I'm going to cut just above. So we get that little tuft, but as you can see, it's not opening out, it's not fraying. And then what we're going to do then is we're going to do exactly the same as we did with the first bell cap. So this is the one that I've prepared with the clasp. I'm going to take my glue, I'm going to pop one drip into the cap, flip it up, and then I'm going to take my other end of my cord. I'm just going to feed that in nice and neatly into the bell cap, like so. So it's now nice and secure. And again, just wait a moment to let that set, and we were ready to go to turn that into our piece of jewellery. So as I mentioned, there are two variations. We can use the beading thread version, which doesn't use glue, but you will still need glue to pop it into the bell cap, or you can do the glue version, which saves a bit of time. You obviously use a bit more glue. Very, very secure. Both versions are very secure. It's entirely personal preference which one you prefer. So we've now popped on our bell caps. And as I said, they come in varying different sizes. But sometimes you may make a braid that you don't have a bell cap to fit, or you have a bell cap and you don't have any of the braid thick enough. So we're going to make our own. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare this end. So I'm going to use the glue version. So again, I'm going to take my glue. I'm just going to put just a little dribble of glue all the way around. And with a few cords, they actually go a shade darker using the glue. So the glue will show you where you need to cut. Okay, so we're just going to pop that to one side. And for this, you will need, as we mentioned in the tools of the trade section, your flush cutter pliers, and you're also going to need 0.8mm wire. I've gone for gold in this case, but again, you can color coordinate your wire color with your braid. And then we've got our bail making pliers. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a length of wire. You don't need very much, maybe 15 centimetres, maybe 20, there we go. And then we're going to use our flush cutters to cut our wire. We're going to pop our cover back on to keep it together. We're going to cut off that little end like so. And the first thing we need to do is we need to determine which of our 6 bails on our bail making pliers is the size we need for our cord. And that's just basically holding the bail up against. Now I think it's probably going to be the 4th largest. Again, it's all trial and error. If that one works out to be too small, you move up to the next size. So let's start with this one. We may need to do a larger. So I'm going to hold the pliers in my left hand. I'm going to take a short piece of wire and I'm going to hold it in the center of my pliers. Make sure I'm in the right direction. There we go. So you're holding the wire in your left and we're going to aim for bail number 4. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the wire around the mandrel of the bail makers. Trying to get as tight as you can, like so. Okay, so you've got that wrapped around your... So before I go any further, I'm going to check that my cord fits. So the glue has now gone off. So this is slightly thicker cord, so I'm going to use my flush cutters to cut through the cord. Now you can see perfectly now that the glue has held all of those cords together and it's stopping the fraying. So have I made the right choice? Let's have a look. There we go. Let's have a look. Yes, I have. That was the right size to use. If you find that it won't just slot in, just twist it, use the wire as a little screw. So you can now see that the wire is fitting in inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to now make this into our very own bell cap. So you've got 2 tails. You've got a short tail at a right angle, and then you've got the tail that is following the direction. We're going to cut the tail off. That has got the right angle. So we're just going to go in and cut that. And then what we're going to do at the end is we're going to, about 1 centimetre from the coil, we're going to cut. And then using our round nose pliers, from our basic toolkit, we're going to form a loop. We're going to curl back into our coil. So we're just going to go in and we're going to make a loop. So you can see now that we've got a nice neat loop. And then what we're going to do, with that loop, we're going to hold it in our flat nose pliers and we're simply going to drag it, maneuver it into the top of that coil. So holding it nice and tight, and we're just going to curl. So you can now see that we've got our wire cap and we've got our little loop in the center. And again, that loop will then take your clasp, your jump rings, etc. to finish your braid piece of jewellery off. And then what we're going to do then is we're going to offer our braid up to our cap. And let's see, so I'm going to twist that into position. Perfect. That was just the right size to use. So I'm simply going to twist it as you would a screw. You can now see it starting to come up to our cap underneath. So we're going to go in again just to make sure that sits nice and secure. And again, there are 2 ways of finishing your cap off. You can either, before you inserted your braid into the cap, you can just pop on a little piece of glue. But what I like to do is using the very end of the coil. You can just see the little tail of the coil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flat nose pliers. Oops. I'm going to take my flat nose pliers, just pop this back into position. Make sure that's nice and secure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to push that last little bit of tail of the coil into the braid. So I'm simply going to fold it into the braid. I'm just going to go in and give it a bit of a squidge. There we go. So all I've done is you can see I've folded that last coil into the braid. Once it's in that position, you can go in and give it another squidge if you want a bit more security. So now that is fully caught in your ending that you've made. If you find that it's come out of shape, just give it a bit of an adjustment, or if you want to, you can use 1mm wire for something big and substantial like this. And then once you've got your bell cap, your handmade bespoke bell cap in position, we can then, using our jump rings and our clasp, attach at the end. And there we go. So as long as you've got your 0.8 or 1mm wire, there'll never be an occasion where you can't have a finished bell cap or a cap ending for your Kumihimo pieces of work. So we've shown you how to do your finishing the braid with the thread version or the glue version. You will need to use glue for your cap endings. We've covered that. And then I've also shown you how we can make our own bespoke cap endings. And again, you can color coordinate the color of your wire to your braid. You can go down silver route or the antique bronze or the copper. So again, it opens up so many different doors in your finishing off. So I think we've covered pretty much everything. We've shown how to set up your disc. We've shown you gauges of cord and how to attach your cord to your bobbins. We've shown you the 8-cord warp, and we've shown you the 12-cord braid as well. We've shown you how to incorporate seed beads and gemstones, and we've shown you all the finishing off techniques. So I think we've pretty much covered all of the details that you need to make all of these pieces of jewellery here. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, there will be a follow-up tutorial showing you how to incorporate patterns and different spiral techniques in your Kumihimo. So make sure you keep an eye out the Jewellery Maker website for details of that, and I'll also pop the details on my guest designer Facebook page. So thank you very much for spending the afternoon with me today. Hope you enjoy your little delve into the world of Kumihimo. There's only one problem with Kumihimo: it's incredibly addictive. So make sure you pop onto the Jewellery Maker website and check out the Jewellery Maker Academy pages to find out what's coming up next and which other guest designers have popped on tutorials. Hope you've had a wonderful time. My name's been Mark Smith. I've had an absolute joy sharing this technique with you, and I hope to see you soon.